And obviously it has its flaws because it is a kid show and they can't decapitate people on TV.
Whatever.
In a kid show, we get it. Hi, I'm Kat.
And I'm Gabe.
And we are the Ghouls next door. We'll always save the day.
If you think we can, we'll always find a way. We are the Ghouls Next Door, a media literacy show from a horror lens where we explore the real life, historical, and dramatic reasonings behind our cinematic fears or cartoons. Cinematic cartoon fears.
That transition, though, Gabe, so smooth.
Thank you. You clods. We are covering Steven Universe, including the movie and future, because there's so much to unpack during our The Kids Are All Right series. Steven Universe is definitely one of my favorite, like, not just cartoons, but like film, like shows of all time for a variety of reasons, which we're going to unpack. I think it comes up a lot and just like an example of how to like educate, empower an audience and do it in a way that's not like annoying. I guess like some people like hate being force fed certain things, but Steven is such a fun show that it's almost like, oh wait, I'm learning something, I'm feeling something all of a sudden, and oh, we all have to unpack this thing that's happening.
Yeah, it's doing a bunch, but it's also like you thought the kids were all right. They're not all right, especially in Steven Universe. Well, like Connie's pretty well adjusted, but like she does have a self-acceptance journey. But like the other children, Steven specifically, oh my God, the neglect. It's a fun time.
It's just, it is a lot. Like everyone's got stuff to unpack, and they do. It's one of those shows I feel like really dives into the peripheral characters in a interesting way, in a way that doesn't feel like they're being neglected or looked over, and it's something I just really appreciate.
Yeah, you get like well-rounded and well thought out characters for like almost every character they show. They don't just like show somebody for no reason, like they get their own little highlight upon them at some point throughout the show, which is dope.
Yeah. It's also interesting because it's like when we think of anime, Steven Universe, like Steven is very on par with those newer like anime heroes that we were saying, where it's coming from a place of care and they just want to help people instead of like punch the best. And that's like how it works. And then also unlike
problems away.
Yeah. And then unlike anime where sometimes it goes for so long and the storyline gets a little muddied, this had like a concrete story that it was going through and then achieved in the end in a way that wasn't like super upsetting.
Yeah, like I don't think it wasn't like the unfortunate Game of Thrones. Like you were happy with the ending. You're like, oh wow, everyone got their closure. Everyone's like doing okay.
Yeah.
We feel okay about this. This makes me think like it's like literally like your 20-something-year-old self is talking to like middle school you, and it's like you're gonna be okay. It's like that because you get to see the characters like grow up more.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
like,
because they
be
have the
okay.
movie, which like it shows that things are not solved at the end of Steven Universe. So then we also have Steven Universe Future because it's like, what happens next? What's going on?
Oh
now?
yeah, that's what I meant. Like the Steven Universe Future, you end with like oh okay, everyone is okay for the most part.
Yeah, we're gonna be okay. And that's, I really appreciate that. For folks who are tuning in and watching us, we are dressed as two awesome characters. I'm dressed as Peridot, and Kat is Lapis Lazuli.
It's true.
So I will be, in my section, really diving into the different gems. So if you have not watched Steven Universe, I tried my best to explain. It's a children's show, so it's wacky. It's also like animated, so it's got some crazy things going on. And Kat is going to dive into Steven himself and then just overall trauma of the show, which is
Yeah.
very important,
Such
very
trauma.
covered to the end. Everybody's got trauma, and it's okay.
Yeah. Because you gotta look at it. You gotta look at it and you gotta face it. It's like all the corrupted gems. You gotta like heal from the like what we thought was irreversible damage. Like you just gotta work a little harder to help everybody. It's like a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot to unpack. It's a great show though.
Yeah, it's such a good show. Highly recommend. But why don't we dive in? All right. So, Steven Universe, we're going to cover, like I said, the original series, future, as well as I'm going to touch on a plot point in the film because it was pretty important for a big piece of my section where I get to unload a lot of my angst for certain
As
characters.
should. As
Uh,
should.
certain like hate watching times for me when it came to Steven Universe. But Steven Universe, the original series from 2013 to 2019, was about a team of intergalactic warriors fights to protect the Earth. But the combination of three highly trained beings and one quirky young boy leaves the team struggling to overcome the dangerous scenarios that are put in front of them. And it's created by Rebecca Sugar. And in Steven Universe Future, which was from 2019 to 2020, tying up the ending there, and it features a big time jump. The series
Mm-hmm.
focuses on the aftermath of the events of Steven Universe, where humans and gems coexist in harmony after the end of the war between the Crystal Gems and Homeworld. Also, Rebecca Sugar. So, yeah. Steven Universe is a phenomenal show covering many issues and experiences while promoting compassion, growth, and freedom of expression. The show begins as a very much a children's show with this main character and lovable boy Steven, who is up to silly antics in his small town. Steven Universe definitely has a lot of like kid filler episodes, but it's still like charming, and you're invested in these characters, and even when they're having like a good day, you're like, oh good. They're just doing something
Mm-hmm.
silly. But as the show progresses, the world is built upon and characters are given opportunities to grow into themselves, and the show becomes something more than just a children's show. I have laughed, I have cried, and I have felt inspired while watching Steven Universe. And throughout the 7 years of the show's run, it explored identity, queer love, capitalism, climate change, disabilities, grief, trauma, and more. Like never
Yeah.
ending. And each character in the show is exploring their own path towards self love and acceptance. So I plan to discuss each gem's specific journey, try to summarize it a little bit so that you can see how each one of them represented very specific journeys that someone could relate to and find their own love. All right, so just to give a synopsis, my attempt at explaining what happens in Steven Universe, because it is a crazy world. It is a really weird situation. So just bear with me and hopefully it makes sense for non watchers, but I do think anyone who's seen it will really appreciate it. But Steven Universe is a mixed boy living in Beach City with his family, and Steven is part human and part gem. That's where the mixed part comes in. But gems are an alien race of femme presenting humanoids who live on a distant planet and have a bunch of colonies because they're colonizers. Gems belong to a hierarchical caste society where they are created to perform special duties, specific duties for what they were born into. That's their whole thing. They are expected to perform those duties required of them depending on their gem identity. So, for example, rubies protect. They're like bodyguards. Similar to quartz, who are also bodyguards, but more of like a military force. They're bigger and stronger. Pearls are designed to pamper and care for the ruling class, the diamonds. Steven's mom was one of these gems, a rose quartz, who now he is inheriting this. That's why he is mixed in that way. Um,
Yeah.
however, she is unlike the Homeworld Gems and instead was a rebellion leader for a group called the Crystal Gems who fought against the oppressive regime of the Homeworld to protect planet Earth from colonialization and environmental destruction, as well as fight for their right to simply exist in the unique ways that they do. Yes, this is a children's show. Like writing this, I was like, this sounds absolutely insane. Like the oppressive regime. It literally is that. And it's a casting
Yeah, it's,
stuff.
like, pretty spot on for it, like, being a children's show too, like, it's surprising how deep they get,
Yeah,
which
it's
is,
not
like,
subtle.
part of its benefit. It's not subtle at all.
But it's like fun. It still is very much a kid show. It's like
Yeah,
colonialization for children. The
yeah,
gems have special abilities that correspond to their gems, like their species, I guess. But
yeah.
further, the crystal gems have their own unique weapons and powers used to protect the earth, each other, and ultimately their way of life, because it is in opposition to what the diamonds have been instilling in all the other gems. A unique ability that gems have is to join together to become something bigger through the act of fusion. That's what they call it, like Dragon Ball. On Homeworld, you may see several rubies fused together to form a larger ruby. This can also be seen with a topaz. They just become a bigger version of what they are. However, though we do know that fusion exists for Homeworld gems, they never fuse with a different gem class. That's not allowed. It's segregation. And the crystal gems, however, can be seen fusing together to become something not only stronger and bigger than the whole homeworld gems, but something altogether new. So they don't just become a bigger version, a stronger version of the gem they are combining two different gems to become something totally different. And this new being is made with a distinct personality. It tends to be a combination of the traits exhibited in the gems who are fusing, like
Yeah.
highlighted points of them, and they have a new look, name, and voice. For example, Amethyst and Pearl make Opal, who is a tall, giant woman of elegance. And as Amethyst describes her to Steven, she's an ultra powerful, stone cold Betty. That part's me. And she's like kind of tall. That part's Pearl. Or Sugalite, who's a fusion between Amethyst and Garnet, who is a strong rock star, voiced by Nicki Minaj.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's so funny.
Yeah. And their Sugalites are there for like just an episode, and then in like at the end, or maybe yeah, I think it's at the end, there's a part where they're getting all the different uh like fusions together, and they make a reference like, do we still have to pay her? Like it's like kind of off. I don't remember why, but I just remember one of the gems mentions that, like, do we still have to pay her? And she just had one line. They're like, yeah, you have to pay Nicki Minaj. But even Steven learns to fuse and becomes uniquely powered gems with the crystal gems. But unlike the crystal gems, he can also fuse with his best friend Connie, who's a human, to become Stevani, who's half human, half
Yeah.
gem, non binary person, who, just like Connie and Steven, are working through growing pains to discover who they are. So it's just
Mm.
very important. The reason why I want to bring up fusion, because that's going to come up, is that generally on Homeworld, it is the same gems becoming bigger, and that's like normal. For crystal gems, it's different gems and they become someone new. And
Yeah.
there's a trust and this representation of like healthy relationships that are important when it comes to fusing. There's a consent portion of it, there's
Yeah.
teamwork, there's just like you allowing this other person to have a part of you, and that becomes a point of contention for a lot of them in different ways, and is a link to a very specific trauma for a character later.
Yeah.
So Steven's mom, Rose, is not in the show because she has done something completely unexpected. She fell in love with a human. To create
Yep.
Steven, she had to give up her existence because no one really knows how you make a half gem baby, uh, especially because the way that gems are made. It's not like the birds and the bees that we have. And Steven
Yeah.
sports his mother's gemstone and is often referred to as her by any of the homeworld gems because they do not understand that he's something new.
Yeah.
They just think it's her with a new look because they can change their look often. The first
Yeah.
season of Steven Universe is about Steven beginning to unpack the complexities of his mother's existence, but more than that, separating himself from her legacy to become his own person. And he has to ask himself, like, how much of himself is her and how much of her debt should he shoulder? And that's like
Yeah.
what he's unpacking the entire season, but we're introduced to it in season one. The
Yeah.
crystal gems that have not been wiped out by Homeworld are now Steven's found family, along with his father, Greg Universe. And we learn throughout the series, as we get to know the histories of the crystal gems, that they are each something truly special. And beyond saving the planet from being robbed of its natural resources for gem production, the crystal gems are themselves an act of rebellion, purely for existing. So each one of them represents some difference between the difference from the norm of the homeworld colonies. So let's get into the crystal gems and what each one of their journeys is, and we try to be fast.
You
We
got
were
this. I
joking that
believe in you.
it would take like hours to cover everything there is to know about Steven Universe. So bear with
Yeah. I
us.
feel like you'd have to, like, write a thesis or, like, do a video series, just
Like a
every
whole book.
single piece of it. Yeah.
So here's a little bit about each of the crystal gems, though there's so many other characters that we could cover as well. Even just the humans themselves have their own journeys, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
highlight some of the specific ones, and this is by no means the extent of what they go through and why and how. It's just like a little teaser. So Pearl is a mother figure for Steven, and unlike any Pearl on her homeworld, pearls are usually delicate and subservient, catering to the needs of their diamond. Whenever we see other pearls, they're kind of like dainty and just like don't have their own thoughts in their head or aren't allowed to
Yeah.
have those. However, this pearl is an elegant fighter and tactical genius. She protects the family and serves as the right hand, or served as the right hand to the leader Rose during the war. And Pearl's journey is one of self love and reconciling unrequited love, because she works to accept the strength in her and confront the stereotypes that others make on her based on her gem identity. But she's also very much in love with Steven's mother, Rose, and struggles with what Steven's existence means for Rose's love for Greg. And so she clearly,
Yeah.
Rose had some affection towards Greg enough to create a whole being with him. And she loves Rose. It's like, she's not even allowed to do that. So, and all
Yeah.
gems are femme presenting. So I'd say the queerness of her love is not exactly, it's not something that's struggled against, but accepted because they're all femme.
Mhm.
The issue comes from her loving a gem unlike her own,
Mhm.
and kind of stepping out of her lane. Because Rose is like, the leader. Like, who are you?
Yeah.
Moving on. Amethyst is a stout and spunky gem who can shapeshift and is much like an unruly sibling to Stephen. However, amethysts, like other quartz, are designed to be large, strong protectors. Amethysts, the characters' kindergarten, which is where gems are made, they're made in the ground, which is how
Mhm.
the resources are depleted from planets because they're used to make the gems. Um, Amethyst, the character's kindergarten, was abandoned, leaving her to be born significantly later and looking very different from other amethysts. Amethyst struggles with her identity, having been born different and further raised exclusively here on Earth, never having seen the homeworld. Like, she doesn't even know she should look different or that
Mhm.
others look different. And so that's like a journey for her to figure out what that means. And she's wrestling with her own identity and finding her place in the crystal gems and feeling worthy of love, because she also wasn't there during the war and didn't really know Rose as deeply as the other crystal gems. And she's also young. She's a baby until Steven showed up. So she's got a lot to work through. And had
Yeah.
she been born into the homeworld colonies, she'd have been tossed aside, hunted, or even destroyed for being different. They shatter gems, which is ultimately, that's it, you're dead if they're different, because then they
Yeah.
can't do what they're supposed to do, which sounds an awful lot like some really terrifying historical events.
Yep.
So, not subtle. Next is Garnet, who is a tall, strong, and level headed mother figure for Steven. And where Pearl can be a bit of a helicopter parent, Garnet is calm, cool, and collected, allowing Steven to explore the world around him, but always watching from afar in case she is needed for support. She's such a great mom. Pearl's also a really great mom. They just have like
Yeah.
different mom styles, and I love that for them. It is revealed
Yeah.
later in the series that Garnet is a very special gem because Garnet is a fusion all the time. So I explained what fusions were before. So Garnet is comprised of two gems in love. Ruby and Sapphire, who were connected in a fateful event during the wars, and these two gems have fused to become the powerful and loving Garnet. And her fusion of two different gems makes her an outsider to the homeworld gems, some even calling her an abomination. They say terrible things about her just
Yeah.
because she is comprised of two different gems instead of just what, like, rubies make big rubies and only mix with other rubies. She's an interracial she's an interracial couple, and she gets a lot of hate for that. And what I really love is that Garnet is the embodiment of love, and through the crystal gems, she learned to accept herself and the love her two gems feel for one another, and what it means to be this one being
Yeah.
that is comprised of two beings. It's a like identity is so complex, and she's just that. And as the show progresses, Homeworld gems become aware of the existence of the crystal gems, and there are other gems that come to Earth to investigate. And though each one finds themselves affected by the freedom and new understanding of themselves when interacting with the crystal gems, uh, so they come here to like fight them, and then they're like, "Oh wait, you could live a different way."
Yeah, like,
There's
this
a
seems
different
pretty
way to do
brave,
this.
though. Like, maybe we shouldn't fight, maybe we should all just be best friends and live here
Yeah.
together.
Like, why are we mad? Because this doesn't seem like you told me this is wrong, but it doesn't look wrong. It actually looks fun and
Yeah, it looks,
lovely.
like, great, yeah.
So, two of the later members of the Crystal Gems, Peridot and Lapis Lazuli, are tasked with unpacking their trauma alongside the founding Crystal Gems, who, through though still healing, have had much more times to discover themselves. And so we do get to see a more raw exploration of their trauma, similar to Steven's, because he's working through it through the show. But the other
Yeah.
ones kind of have already been like, especially Garnet. Like Garnet's good. She's solid.
Yeah.
Pearl's got some stuff that she's working through. Amethyst 100% starts to have to unpack some of those things, but had already kind of built up a resolve for it. Peridot and Lapis, super new, and we get to see not only them in the aftermath of trauma, but in the midst of it. So it's
Yeah.
pretty affecting. Paradots, which again, if you're watching, is what I'm dressed as, are technologically savvy gems with long limbs and similar powers to the other gems, including fusion and manifesting weapons. However, the Peridot we meet in the show is revealed to be wearing limb enhancers and has no powers, overcompensating for
Yeah.
what you can to look like what Peridots are supposed to look like. And the Crystal Gems Peridot was born on a planet that had minimal resources because of their environmental disasters and colonialization. And so when
Yeah.
they were trying to create new gems, it resulted in them being created incompletely. And so she's tiny. She's a little one.
Yeah.
She's a spunky little thing. And as Peridot interacts with these earthly gems, she slowly begins to accept herself and no longer relies on those limb enhancers. But she also understands she's incredibly intelligent and discovers a small spark of power within herself. And her arc is really quite sweet, and it's
Yeah.
one of like breaking from the mold and stop like and not being subservient, and fighting back and like feeling empowered in that. Like, I can call you a Claude, I called Yellow Diamond a Claude to her face. And it's just like,
Yeah.
also like when she stops using the limb enhancers, it really was a emotional thing for her, because it's her accepting that she is different and it's not what she's been told is the right way to look. And
Yeah.
when she starts being
Learns to
herself and
love
being
herself,
little,
yeah.
yeah, it's like she's cool with it. But even more impressive is her relationship with fellow homeworld gem Lapis, who she is forced to cohabitate with and later becomes pretty much best friends. Definitely partners in
Yeah.
life. And she learns compassion, patience, and even how to be funny. Though that
Yeah.
is a fun time because when she first starts doing jokes, she just becomes mean. And I was like, that is
Yeah.
kind of like what like comedy was for a long time. Just be mean to people.
Yeah. Or you just say nice
And-
things. And they're like,
yeah,
why are you mad? Because I said it's
yeah,
supposed to be
it's just a
funny.
joke. I don't get
Yeah.
it. But then she like really feels bad. Like when she hurts like Annika's
Yeah.
feeling, she's like immediately about trying to listen and understand because she herself had to like work through how she fits out here. So she's like, okay, I get it. This is hard. What can I do? I just want to make sure I'm helping.
Yeah.
um so the next is Lapis Lazuli, who is a truly complicated and traumatized gem who was used by the gems in power as a tool. They were trying to use her as a spy during the gem war, and she was trapped in a mirror and used as this weapon. But then Lapis's mirror was cracked during the war, and it sealed her within the glass tomb until Stephen accidentally heals and releases her. He was
Yeah.
just like, this mirror is funny. And now she's this person out, and she harbors resentment towards those who used her, but also those who didn't release her. Because she's just been in
Yeah.
there and she's like, why didn't you save me? Like, why did you
Yeah.
give up so quickly? And she doesn't know any of the things that occurred. All she knows is suffering. And later she is forced to fuse with a very harmful gem, Jasper. They're very aggressive. I saw this like little article about how Jasper might also represent like uh religious brainwashing, and I was like, yeah.
Okay.
Jasper definitely gives that
Yeah.
vibes where they she is a servant of her Diamond, who's kind of like her god, and anybody telling her that shouldn't be the way it's supposed to be is just that's not going to happen. But she's very
Yeah.
aggressive, and this fusion, and like as I explained before, like fusion like should be a point of consent. It should be something that is beneficial for both people. There has to be like an understanding between them, and that is explored early on in the series when there was like some issues with it being used improperly between Pearl and Garnet. So
Yeah.
when we see Lapis being fused with Jasper, it is really upsetting and very clearly abusive and traumatizing for Lapis,
Yeah.
who, having just escaped the mirror, is now once again chained against her will, quite
Yeah.
literally. So she later chooses to stay in this abusive relationship with the intent of keeping Jasper from hurting others. And there isn't any blaming or shaming of her as a victim, and the act, though troubling, is heroic in some ways because it's a complex thing when we're exploring abusive relationships and the act of staying in those, because it's
Yeah.
so easy to dub that as weakness. But her complex relationship with Jasper and her own um seeking validation and her own strength is super like valid and real. There's this
Yeah.
like later scene in the series where she encounters Jasper again after having been freed from the fusion and is like working on healing. Like she's trying to reconnect with water because she's like a water based gem, and she just has this complicated history with the water because she was just stuck with someone she shouldn't
Yeah.
be in an abusive relationship in. So she's trying to figure out how to exist with water, and she sees Jasper, and she has this kind of, a conversation, this kind of aggressive conversation, but she explains, I liked taking everything out on you. I needed you. I hated you. And it really shows the complexity of being in abusive relationships where it comes this like codependency, the harm that she was subjected to, and the lack of compassion from anyone in her life made her vulnerable and distrusting to other people and other gems. Like she had been let down and all the time, every single time.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really hard for her, more than all the other gems, to allow herself to trust. And she has the hardest time adjusting to Earth and trusting the crystal gems because of that. And she harbors so much resentment that she cannot accept an easy life, because she's like stuck in her fight or flight response and constantly
Yeah.
seeking retribution for her treatment. So it's like, I can't sit and enjoy my life on this farm because my body is
Yeah.
still like panicking because at any moment it could be gone. What life has taught me is that at any moment anything could go wrong and I'm not allowed to be happy. And
Yeah.
that really affects her growth. But her relationship with Peridot and Steven, through that, she slowly allows herself to feel joy and begins to express herself through art, which she calls Morbs because she's so cute.
Yeah, Morbs was
It's
great. I love
because
Morbs.
it's still a kids show. Like it's so crazy. Her arc is really intense, whereas all the other ones are like
Yeah.
subtle. Hers is very obviously abuse, and the pain that she has to endure is really raw in the show. And I
Yeah.
think it's um, quite. And then also later in the future, she has like an interaction with other lapis lazulis, and
Mhm.
there's like that kind of shows how she was learning and how she's trying to influence these lapis uh, and that struggle. And then also there's a moment where there's a ruby who is living on their farm and is just like, oh, everything's wonderful, I love it here. And lapis is like, that's not right. Lapis is like, it
Yeah,
took me
you should be
forever.
having a harder time. You should it's not easy to get used to stuff.
Yeah, it's
This
like,
is
it's,
hard.
am I wrong? Like, it's like, is
Yeah.
something wrong with me that it took me this long to do that? And it's like, totally, that's not, first of all, it's not the case. Uh, it's revealed that. But also, like, everyone heals differently and has their own things that they have to work through. And she learns that because, like, even Peridot, like, grew
Yeah.
differently, and more like she got into it a lot easier. Um, but the Pretzel Gems are a beautiful family of misfits who have broken from the molds and in simply existing are rebelling. And throughout the show, we see many other gems struggling to exist in the oppressive world the diamonds created. That's the top of the class there. And
Yeah.
including the off-color gems that Steven finds on Homeworld much, much later in the series. These gems feature physical abnormalities and even some intense fusions, and they have been deemed defective and off color because it's all very colored dividing
Yeah.
because they're the name of the gems. Anyway, by Homeworld strict standards and caste system. And that was a really interesting episode because you saw how, if the crystal gems weren't on Earth, how they would have been hunted and possibly shattered simply for
Yeah.
existing. Like, it becomes that much more real how dangerous it is for them to just exist the way that they are,
Yeah.
which is like normal. Like, they're just existing. Like Amethyst, done. She would not be at all. Um, Later in Steven Universe Future, gems who've been freed from the cruel diamond hierarchical society struggle to find their place in society, relearning how to attribute their worth into something other than the job they were born to complete. That's all they were. It's like, you were created to do this task. If you can't do that task anymore,
Yeah.
you're worthless. It's very capitalist. And instead,
Yep.
they are here and they're like, what do? I pursue things that just bring me happiness? That doesn't make any sense. That's not allowed. And it's a very fun tying up of what they do. But in future, when they are trying to find them new jobs, Amethyst, in explaining to Steven how she was helping each of the homeworld gems readjust uh and put their readjust their healing journeys, she says everyone here has their own weird history and they should each get to choose how they feel about it, which is the whole thesis of the show. Everyone's
Yeah.
got stuff. Everyone's got trauma, and it's up to
Yeah.
you to. It's not your fault that trauma happened to you, right? We say that all the time. But it is your responsibility to grow and heal from it, and that is what they're doing. So
Yeah.
this all brings me to a part of Steven Universe that I don't quite agree with, which is the redemption of the diamonds and Steven's mother Rose. Because just
Fair.
the existed, like, how much work and trauma they had to go through to love themselves and just be allowed to live. I just can't. So here there be spoilers. There's big spoilers in my section. So I'm gonna try to keep it concise. even in those little bits, there were some spoilers, like the whole thing with Garnet, but that's like episode 5 or something. I try to
Yeah, my
shy away
section is
from.
also filled with spoilers, so just so you know, it's spoiler
Got it.
central.
Spoilers from here on out. Right?
Yeah,
So I did try to shy away from big plot points and big reveals. So if you do not want to be spoiled for the end of Steven Universe or the movie, to go watch the stuff and then come back and watch the rest of our show
yeah,
through. Um,
yeah,
so Stephen is a kind soul who, having been raised by beings of love and freedom, brings this unique outlook to the homeworld to confront the diamonds. And by this time, it had been revealed that Stephen's mom, Rose Quartz, is in fact not a quartz at all, but a diamond. Hmm.
yeah,
Which, remember, is the ruling class that makes everyone do what they tell them to do and for why, and will shatter you if you don't. So,
yeah.
blah.
Like they're
Um,
evil.
yes, like straight
Yeah,
up, there's no reason. There's no reason either. Like, and I get it because it's a kid show. It's not like we can explain, but like,
yeah.
anyway,
It's raw
the
funny.
diamonds are the ruling class of all the gems, and it's comprised of 4 beings: white, yellow, blue, and pink. Pink is gone, just was murdered, at some point revealed, murdered by Rose Quartz, but now is revealed is actually Rose Quartz was Pink Diamond. Yeah,
Yeah,
you got it, everyone. Cool. So Rose, who is actually Pink Diamond, was the youngest of this family and was given Earth as her first colony. She's a colonizer.
yeah,
Okay. And it is through her boredom that she finds herself on Earth, where she quickly falls in love, quotations, with the gems she's created, but also the Earth itself, because it is just so fascinating. And she
yeah,
attempts to, she attempts to convince the diamonds to leave Earth alone, but after being denied this like once, she stages her own death at the hands of a rose quartz, which is
yeah,
herself. Right.
yeah.
And I do not like Rose. If you couldn't tell from my voice and maybe the faces I was making, it's not subtle. The entire time
Yeah,
I would watch, and just knowing who she was, like when my rewatch, whenever she popped up for like Steven to have a memory, I was like, like mocking her. I was like, it's all fake. It feels fake when you know. When you know, it
yeah,
ruins everything. Like she's never, like I've never seen her as a mom. Anyway, so I
yeah.
don't
She
like her.
sucked. I
She
agree with you.
sucks.
Yeah,
Her fascination with earth beings and even the different gems, the crystal gems, always felt like a prince playing at pauper, like belittling them. Like they're fascinating because like you live in a world where it's not life or death. Like you made it life or death for you. Like it wasn't.
yeah,
And it never would have been. Like you literally had to change what you look like so that you could feel danger. So whatever.
yeah.
Her
Like
decision.
appropriation, yeah. Just like I don't
Yeah,
feel any of the
literally.
like the bad parts of it. So like it's just fun for me. So fascinating and fun and quirky. Let me just like be this.
Yeah, it is
But
appropriation. It's like all those like people who are like in the universities and they're head of the like Black College Association, and then it turns out they were never black. That's what
yeah,
Rose Quartz is. She was never Rose
yeah,
Quartz. She was a
yeah.
colonizer. Like I
Yep.
can't. And like never addressed that. Never confronted that. Never unpacked. Oh, so her decision to pretend to be a rose quartz instead of confronting her family results in many wars worth of gems dying or getting bubbled,
Yep.
trapping, which is
Yeah.
trapping the gems in bubbles where they remain inert forever. Anyway,
Yeah.
she, the bubbling or shattering of gems happens. Also, the what is the word? Corrupting of gems
Yep.
happens during the war, and the bubbling is also including all the other real rose quartzes, which she never sets free later. So because she pretended to be a rose quartz, the diamonds are like the rose quartz did it. So now, because we don't know which one it was, we just have to remove all of them. And the only reason they're not destroyed is because blue is sad.
Yeah.
but but had this not been a kid show, all of them would be dead
Yeah.
because by
Genocide.
association she would have killed an entire group of people because she's pretending to be them. Like
Yep.
even more upsetting is the character Rose is revealed to be the character that Rose is revealed to be in the Steven Universe movie. They really did a number. They were like, we're not pretending that she's anything good. We want everyone
Yeah.
to know. Like, that's one thing that's like, they didn't they were very true to her, and, I think that was nice. I wish they could be a little more mean, they could be a little more honest, but, um,
Yeah.
it's a good show. But in the Steven Universe movie, we learn that Pink Diamond had a gem assigned to her to keep her entertained. It is a fun gem named Spinel, who resembles an old-timey cartoon character like Mickey Mouse, mixed with Jenny the teenage robot. That's
Yep.
what she looks like. She's fun and she does like wacky stuff. She's like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm Spinel. Um, and when Pink Diamond, the spoiled little brat that she is, becomes bored and annoyed and tired of Spinel's humor, she challenges her to a game where she forces her to stay still on an abandoned garden planet to be forgotten forever. Gems don't die unless they're shattered, like
Yeah.
they're forcibly murdered, right? So she's just living up there on an abandoned planet, waiting for her best friend to come back. And Pink Diamond slash Rose Quartz, Steven's mother, simply forgets about her. Okay.
Yeah, and, like, knows
And
her impact too, like, knows that she's gonna wait and then just, like, doesn't care. Like, 'cause
it
she's
doesn't
thinks she's better
matter.
than everyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
She has,
And,
like,
like,
the
even if you're like, you argue that that was Pink Diamond, and Pink Diamond was like, she hadn't woke yet, right? Still, Rose Quartz knows who she is. Like, she could have said something.
yeah.
But after Steven has fixed the diamonds, quotes, and convinced them to love, not oppress, Spinel catches this new version of Rose on a screen, which is Steven, and finally understands that she's been got. And Rose either simply forgot Spinel was up there, or worse, did not care. Those are the two options, and both of them are terrible. So, this neglect is seen throughout the show with Rose as she puts the lives of the other gems in harm's way. And in Steven Universe Future, Steven is tasked with healing the physical crack in Pink's pearl. So, remember, all the pearls are subservient to every diamond. And so, he's tasked with trying to heal his mom's pearl. And while trying to
Yeah.
fix her, they discover her physical ailment isn't the result is the result of psychological trauma. Trauma she faced at the hands of Pink, who we learn was susceptible to bouts of anger and abuse. And it is this
Yep.
kind of confliction between the Pearl we know in the show, who had this love for Rose Quartz, not really knowing who Pink Diamond really was. And so you kind of have to reconcile who you knew and who she had been. And in
Yeah.
a truly heartbreaking scene, Pink Pearl, or Volleyball as she's come to be known, explains, she didn't mean to hurt me. I just happened to get too close to her that time, which rings very true to any abuse victim. You often
Yeah.
try to reason away. Everyone loved her so much. Like, it was your role to love her and to make her happy. So if you didn't, it's your fault because of the caste system and because she's evil. Uh,
Yeah.
Rose also knows of Pearl's feelings for her, and instead of rejecting her flat out and just letting her live her life and heal, she uses that love to push her agenda forward. Straight up, she uses her love, and I will take
Yeah.
no other analyses at this time. And
Yeah.
even in her creating of Steven, uh, it was like her love of Greg felt infantile, like a fascination with a puppy rather than a true love. Like, she's just always like, humans are so cool. Like, oh,
Yeah.
humans, you're so weird. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you're so
It's very
exotic.
cringe.
Look at
Yeah.
this exotic. You're so different. And then even in her creating of Steven, she is selfish. She's not ever considering that he would be left with her debt, shouldering her guilt and mistakes, and have to like efface all of the problems she had, because it's either that it didn't occur to her that she would be held responsible for her own actions, given that she's never had to do that before. She's always been immature and childish and just got away with anything, including murder. Or
Yeah.
worse, she did not care. So, which I think is really the answer. Like, it didn't occur to her and she didn't care anyway. Like, that's
Yeah.
just who she is. I
Like,
can't stand her.
accountability, what is that? They locked me in a room for a while.
Oh, and then
That's
I
the
then
worst
I
thing
would
that's happened to
cry,
her.
and then be mad, which
Yeah.
is, like, totally valid. Being locked in a
Yeah.
room, that is a form of
It's
abuse. It
traumatic,
did
yeah,
suck.
but
It was not
also
great, but you have to acknowledge you hurt
murdered
a
a bunch
lot
of
of
people.
people. You hurt so
Yeah.
many people. physically, emotionally, just entire societally. You left me
Yeah, and
out. I
you're just
can't.
like, "Accountability, bye. That's not my problem. This is the child's problem. Let them deal with it."
I made a new being because isn't that so cool and fascinating? Every
It's so
time she
fun as a
talked about
being.
humans, I wondered, "Ugh." It's like it's
Yeah, it's
gross.
super
It's like
gross.
it really is feeling like like it was like a white person being like, "Oh, I love your culture. It's so
Yeah.
interesting. It's so
I
different."
think
It's like
that was
it's
on purpose.
not.
I
Yeah,
think she was
for
like that
sure.
on purpose.
Oh, I can't stand it. Anyway, even more upsetting is the redemption arc of the diamonds because it doesn't make any sense. Okay. It is never explained why they need to make gems the way that they do or why they need to deplete planets of their resources to do this. Like, because there's like, is there money? Because where? What is money? They don't have money. They just
Yeah,
make gems to serve other gems to just be, they're the only force in the universe. What? It's really giving
yeah,
Monsters Inc. and Screams versus Laughter. It's like
yeah,
we don't need it. We have enough. Like what? And the Diamonds care for Pink because she's one of them. That's it. So they work to get Pink back, but they never truly learn that what they did and the way they were living was wrong. It's literally this is the way you can get Pink back is if you play nice. So
yeah.
they do that.
Be like, "Just stop murdering people. That's the exchange," you
And
know?
even still, they're like, but why? And it's like
Yeah, they
right
don't
up
get
into
it, and
the
they, like,
end
don't
when
care. They
like
they say
White
so many
Diamond comes and is like,
things too.
"Oh, you want me to fix this? Okay. Okay, I get it. They can't be
It's, like, a
slaves."
lot of work.
She,
Yeah.
like, literally is like, "Okay, I get it. We can't use the word slaves anymore." Like, it's so absurd. They
Yeah.
murdered and intentionally physically disfigured gems by way of corruption without a second thought. They are the bourgeoisie in their Versailles castle, leveraging gem bodies for their own amusement. I don't get
Yeah.
what the point, like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what the society
Yeah.
is. So there's no explanation as to why the world needed to be this way or why. And I get that because it is a kid show, totally, right? But I just simply disagree with the ease at which the diamonds are redeemed and forgiven when they've been the biggest villain the entire show. Right? Each of the gems' internalized trauma and self-hate can be tied directly back to the regime of the diamonds. And like so we can't just
I
be like,
guess
oh,
they,
it's all
like,
better
couldn't
now.
guillotine them on a children's show, or, like,
Yes,
could they? I don't
exactly.
know.
But I
Like,
could
there's
still
a
be
lot
mad
of
about
heavy
it.
themes. I know, there's,
Yeah.
like, a lot of heavy themes though, so, like, maybe they could've
Well, it's also
like, they
like
could've
like
poofed them and put them somewhere, in the meantime, I
we get
guess.
out
I
and
don't
bubble them.
know.
But I mean, I think the biggest thing was Steven, like when we talked about anime, the new anime boys, the shonen protagonists, and how they're healing people and meeting them with
Yeah.
compassion and understanding instead of just punching them and trying to destroy them.
Punching
Like there's
kicks.
the character
Yeah.
of
Bismuth.
Bismuth has like a completely valid reason to be upset, and she makes this weapon because she's a wonderful blacksmith, makes a weapon to fight the oppressors. And it's also a big deal who she's voiced by and why how she's depicted. She wants to fight against the oppressors. And instead of talking it out, Pink Diamond slash Rose Quartz just bubbles her up and doesn't even tell her friends that she had to do
Yeah.
that. And instead, Steven's like, no, we should actually talk about this. I don't want you to hurt people. And I get that you're hurt. And this is the way that you know to solve that issue, but that we can't do that here. Just that conversation solidifies that we cannot hurt the diamonds and we can't even bubble them because bubbling is bad. So we can't also be bad, right? And
I get that.
and I think
Yeah.
that's complicated. I get it for kids. I totally get it for
Yeah.
kids. But I can still
Yeah.
be mad about it. I could
Eye
still
for an
wish
eye
that it
or
was a
whatever,
different show,
yeah.
you know? I get it.
Yeah, yeah,
But I also
yeah.
think it's totally valid that Bismuth wanted to meet them with violence when violence is what they have always been met with, and it's completely valid for
Yeah.
that. And I also think it's valid for me to want that as well.
Yeah.
Even though it's a kid show, I get it. I get it. People are like, if this is a kid show, you guys are talking about some really intense.
Heavy stuff,
We're
yeah.
like, topple the systems of oppression, burn it down, corrupt them, show them what it's like. And I get it. I totally get it. I
I
get it.
totally
That's
get
not
that.
what we want kids to know about. And they instead they tell them a lot of other stuff. So overall, the show is a phenomenal piece of media, period. Straight up. The
Yeah.
animation's lovely. The characters are wonderful. It is diverse as heck. It is accepting and loving and just empowering and beautiful. And it'll make you cry. It'll make you laugh. highly recommend 10 out of 10, one of my favorite shows of all time. Period, right?
Exactly.
And despite being a kid's show, is one of the few shows that I confidently refer to when talking about unpacking trauma and self-identity, representation, queer love, and all of that in media. If you want a good representation of all of those things, it is this show. And
Yeah.
it's still very much a kid's show, right? With silly antics and absurd characters. But even the human characters, we can see true growth and self acceptance that I don't think we often get to see anywhere else. And for this show to exist and imprint these foundational messages of healing onto children is truly a gift. I would love like
Yeah.
like if there was like people know if there's a comic book series of like Steven Universe that dives into the lore of the diamonds and why they have to do what they do,
Why they
I
gotta
would
be doing
love
that.
that because
Or
I
like,
just
yeah,
don't
when this
get
made for
it.
adults.
Yeah, yeah, for adults, right? And like also like when we see those lapis lazuli and they're like destroying the planet because that's what they're supposed to do, right? It's
Yeah.
just like, but why? What is it?
Yeah.
Why do we have to do that? I just
It's fun. They thought
deplete
it's fun,
resources.
Gabe. They
Ugh,
thought it
but
was
for
fun.
what? Like
And
money?
but then also they're like, "You said we're free, right? Well, this is what we wanna do."
Yeah. And it's like, but you can't destroy the planet.
So,
We
yeah,
have
you
few
can't
rules.
freedom, yes. It's very America. Freedom,
Yeah.
yes. You also can't, like, cause active harm.
Mhm.
Like, you can't just
Sorry.
be
Yeah.
hurting people. When I love the show. I have intentionally bought like the DVD so that I can watch it without the internet. I'm working on getting like the movies and the future version. I got these books. I'm like very obsessed. It's a very good show. It just says a lot. It's doing a lot. It is amazing for representation. Gabe got into a lot of like why. It's just super great. And obviously it has its flaws because it is a kid show and they can't decapitate people on TV
Whatever.
in a kid show. We get it. But there's just so much to say about Steven Universe. And as Gabe was joking, is like we were texting each other. We're like, we need like 6 hours to unpack all this because like I want to individually write an essay about each character and like what they represent and like why they did what they did and etc. But we can't do that.
Mhm.
We don't have
With,
six
like,
hours. We have
evidence.
30 minutes each about like an hour, you know. But this show itself has done like a lot to highlight and teach about the impact of trauma on developing minds. That's going to be the bulk of what I talk about, as well as like self-acceptance, expression, identity, love, and on the other side, oppression, prejudice, war, and you know all those other really fun, heavy themes. But it makes it
That
like
you always see in
understandable.
children's shows.
Yeah. But it makes it, like, really understandable, like, both for adults and kids. Like, I'll say, like, my rewatching of it was totally different than my original watch, because I went into watching Future again with media analysis classes on it. It just was, like, so different because I was, like, paying attention to different stuff, where, like, the first time I watched it, I was like, "This is just really emotional and great." But the second time I was like, "Oh my god, this could mean this and then this and this." So I'm gonna get into that. But,
Yeah.
there's major spoilers in my section, just so you know. I don't hesitate at all. And so if you, as Gabe said, don't watch my section if you haven't seen the show. Cool. So yeah,
Mhm.
it just paved the way for a lot of other shows too, like in terms of like LGBTQIA representation. Like it's really paved the way for other shows to reach more audiences because of like how widely loved Steven Universe was. And Steven Universe Future takes the original show even further. So like you get a lot of like Steven Universe, the original, is still pretty spot on, but you get like a lot more unpacked and like more on the nose in Steven Universe Future. I think more because of like the time that it existed in. Where like
Mhm.
2013, it was a different time in media than it was in
Yeah.
2019, 2020. So like you
True.
actually get like a non-binary character like outwardly stated and stuff like that, which you didn't really get stated in the original show. So the
Stephanie
future,
is they them.
do they blatantly say that in the show
Mhm.
though?
Yeah. Stephanie even
Okay.
says, like, we aren't like, they explore that very, very specifically, and
Okay, well
that's
then
pretty
I
early on.
misremember it then. I
It's
misremember that
okay.
then. I read an
It's
article that
still
said
cool.
different.
It's still cool.
It's cool. Yeah. But I remember the parts that it's there. But yeah, so like what it does for like just having like a really like the original was like giving you so much information and fun, but also like heavy stuff. And future's like what happens after all of that happened, and you're just sitting there like, wow, we just got to keep living now.
Mhm.
How we do that, and that's, like, a lot of what it explores, and what I'm gonna unpack is specifically Steven and, like, how they're dealing with the fact that, 1, their parent left them with so much trauma, and the world with so much trauma, and, like, a lot of the understanding of gems very much makes Steven feel like that is his responsibility, and in some ways, it very much is, and in other ways, it's like, this is just a child. He's literally 16 in future, like, having to deal
Mhm.
with just some really adult stuff. So, he himself has experienced a lot of neglect and trauma, like, he does have very wonderful parental caregivers in the form of the gems, but, like, he has also been failed on his human half, in many, many ways, and I'm gonna really get into that, specifically in that, like, in his mixed identity, everyone really focuses on the fact that he's a gem and the fact that he is human, but, like, they don't take care of the human part of him.
Mhm. They forget to do that a
Um
lot.
yeah, and that's where I was like, if you've been watching the Ghouls, you'll know I'm very passionate about this particular topic for no reason. Definitely not projecting, but childhood trauma is something that I'm very passionate about. I, like, get real upset when people neglect their kids, for no reason.
Super
And
valid.
anyway, yeah, throughout the original show, we see a very young, impressionable Stephen struggling to live up to the very troubled legacy of his mother. Stephen, although very much still a young child, is forced to face like very adult problems, responsibility, and like faces like honestly like a lack of understanding of who he really is from everyone around him. In that, like, the gems are unfamiliar with what it means to be human. And they, for the first part of the show, really see Stephen because they don't understand that like rose quartz is like part
Is
human
gone.
now, you know what I mean? Like, that they're
Yeah.
gone, like, they're not Steven anymore, and they don't understand, they think they're just playing a game, like, that eventually like, Pearl at least is like, "Eventually, she'll come back, and it's a weird
Mhm.
game you're playing, Rose, but, like, I know you love me and you're gonna come back to me," and it's like, "No, that's it's a human child who's mixed, is also gem, but is, like, still a baby, and
Mhm.
you need to raise this baby," and it takes them, like, a while to get there. And then we also see, like, Greg Universe defers Steven's care almost entirely to the crystal gems because he's like, "It seems like a lot of work to figure this out, and you guys know. So,
Mhm.
we're just gonna totally
There's 3
neglect
of
the
you
human
and
piece
1 of
of
me,
him."
so
Yeah, you got it. So, this whole adult has never been to the doctor, a dentist, school, like, is a no, none of the things that you need to, like, make sure a baby's okay. None of those
Yep.
things. So that, in my opinion, is what forced Steven, like, in his childhood to basically neglect his own needs because his human needs were not honored, validated, or taken care of. It kind of forced him like to have this neglect for himself, his own emotions at the expense of himself, and like never really establishing like a sense of who he was outside of like this connection to how others saw him as well. And he talks about this like in future where he's like, I have been so spent most of my life just trying to, like, live up to, like, the legacy my mom left and also, like, prove I'm not her, but also, like, deal with the fact that she's, like, done so much harm that, like, I don't know who I am.
Mhm.
And
And he also had to raise himself, like, he's the one who's, like, making himself meals and, like, making sure he's got like, he takes care of himself
his gems
since
don't
the
gotta eat.
beginning. Yeah.
So, yeah, they just neglect the heck out of him, and it's, like, really sad because he gets to, like, be an adult. Well, he's not an adult, he's 16, but he gets to be, like, a teenager, and he's, like, experienced just really hard stuff that like is not standard for the human experience or the gem experience, honestly. Like, it just seems like he's having a hard time,
Mhm.
and like, as I said, like, it's really forced him to just like neglect his own needs and emotions and like force himself to like feel like he's obligated to be there for everybody else, and like he does that with love, but that's like the main point where he's praised for and celebrated is like when he's being helpful to other people, doing heroic things, making people laugh. Like, is the entire like way he gets attention is through like participating in the gem stuff because otherwise they like left him alone, as you said, Gabe. Like, he really had to raise himself, he had to feed himself. They didn't send him to school, they didn't take him to the doctor, like he's just existing. And the only way that he could like feel like he had a family was if he went on gem missions and like participated. So yeah, so much of what he really like what it teaches him later that like when he really does need other people's help, that like his needs weren't met before, so everyone's going to fail him. Like people don't help him when he needs help. So when he actually really, 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 really does need help, like he did before, but like extra now, he doesn't feel like he deserves help because he wasn't given it when he was little. And also because he like feels like he needs to make up for the mistakes of his mother, which in like some ways yes, some ways no. But in Steven Universe Future, we see Steven really forced to grapple with what he's experienced in his life, both in his own childhood, but also like generationally. There are many episodes that like drive this home, but I'll talk through the ones that stood out to me most. Specifically, the most obvious for me is like the first time he ever goes to a doctor when he turns 60 is called Growing Pains, where Steven at age 16 is taken to the doctor for the first time and he's forced to face the damage that has been done to his mind and body. And this is where Connie's mom really lays out everything for Steven in a way that he can't run away from. And I like wrote it all out because I found it really frustrating when I was looking for this that they only showed the video and like some people aren't auditory learners.
Mhm.
So I wrote it out on my blog so that if people want to read it, they can. But yeah, so essentially like he's in the doctor's office and Connie's mom's like, you have like gone through a lot, but basically you've experienced miraculous recoveries, you're okay, but that doesn't change the fact that you've gone through a lot of trauma. Like you've recovered physically, but have you recovered mentally? And Stephen immediately is like, what's wrong with me? And then she's like, not wrong. Like, you're okay. But adverse childhood experiences, or also known as childhood trauma, can have lasting impact on how your body responds to stress. This can affect your social, emotional, and physical development. The show says this, and this is like actual science. So you're seeing a show take on the position of like educating people about trauma, and that's like a super big deal. So she continues that like when humans are in crisis, the brain releases the hormone cortisol, which is true. Your heart races, your muscles tense. I wonder if your body is reacting to a gem equivalent of cortisol. Stephen, do you remember anything bad about your childhood that has particularly stuck with you? And then you see Stephen like talk about like season one.
Mhm. Like his
There's
body
five
being
seasons.
destroyed.
Yeah, so he's like, "I guess I kinda freaked out when they canceled my favorite ice cream, and then I got attacked by a giant bug monster, and then I got trapped in a bubble and almost drowned. I lost control of my body and turned into a blob of cats. I almost turned so old I died. Amethyst almost died. Pearl did die. Garnet got destabilized right in front of me. I woke up with a black eye imprisoned on an alien spaceship." And then she's like, "What are you saying to me? This is
Mhm.
serious. Like, you're saying very traumatic things." And he's like, but that was just the early stuff. Because if you were watching seasons of Steven Universe, it's like a fun, quirky, like happy time. But like what Steven is experiencing is like legitimately not a fun, quirky, happy time. It is like super
Mhm.
traumatic for a baby to go through that.
Yeah.
So Connie's mom is like reacting to that, and just like the fact that like season one, there are a whole five whole seasons. Like Steven almost dies so many times in the
Mhm.
show, and like that's not what a child
Even
should
by
have to
friendly
experience.
fire.
Yeah,
Like Amethyst
it,
almost like knocks him out.
because they just don't get that he's human. It's like a whole thing.
Mhm.
So Connie's mom continues, like, I think these experiences have been subjecting your body to a harmful amount of stress, and that's affecting your ability to face new forms of stress in a healthy way. You've been dealing with genuine threats from such a young age. Your body is now responding to minor threats as if your life were in danger. And then Stephen brings up something that was super real for trauma is like, but why am I only swelling up now? Because in Steven Universe Future, everything's chill. Like, not literally, but like everything's calmed down. Everyone's like
It's
healing and
better.
growing. It's better than it was. And he's like dealing with the fact that like his whole life has been war, chaos,
Mhm.
and like awfulness, and he doesn't feel comfortable in the calm. It's kind of like when Lapis like first comes to Earth, like she's struggling with her identity in this place that feels like so like not safe because she's experienced all this trauma. Steven's experiencing this now because he's finally had to stop fighting. So Connie's mom says stress is less harmful when we have people to trust to help us through it. Maybe you're losing your supportive relationships, or maybe you've had a recent experience that was particularly awful. And then Stephen explodes into this pink blob of stress. And
Mhm.
the fun thing that the show does is that we see like triggering, like being activated, like PTSD, and like as a trauma response physically manifest, which you don't always get. Like when you're dealing, like a lot of people, when they're triggered, they won't have like a physical thing happen. Like it'll just be like they dissociate, or like they'll just be very stressed, or they'll need to like exit. But like Steven literally turns pink and his body starts growing, so you can't ignore it. And he's basically being triggered by the memory of Connie's rejection. So as I said, my section of spoilers filled. And Steven's dad bursts into the room, and his dad's like apologizing, and it gets me every single time because Steven, in classic Steven form of placating and absolving the adults around him of their very real responsibility for caring for him, he like doesn't trust his dad to be there for him because he's honestly
Yeah.
actively neglected him his whole life. So he's like, I'm here, like let me talk to you. And he's like, when have you ever been here? But he doesn't say that.
Yeah.
And then in like desperation, he says the line that like every single time I hear it makes me cry.
Hmm.
Because it's just so legit. Like literally I was watching it last night at like 1 a.m. and I was just like,
Yeah. Oh.
oh, why do I? So Stephen says, my body is reacting like it's the end of the world. I think I've seen the world almost end so many times now that everything that goes wrong feels that extreme. I should be feeling so good these days. The earth is safe, it's era three, but I'm swelling up over these third era problems. What do I do? How do I move on from the stuff I've gone through? How do I live life if it always feels like I'm about to die?
Hmm.
And if
Yeah.
you're
Oh my
me,
gosh.
you're like, oh my God, how do I live life if I always
Mhm.
feel like I'm about to die? Um, but for serious, this episode teaches about a really real thing, which is the impact of adverse childhood experiences on your development, and the way that sometimes for treat, your body and mind will struggle much more with the calm after the trauma than the trauma itself, or at least it'll feel that way. So, like, if you've been through a lot of trauma and you're like out of it, something you might say is, I used to be so good at dealing with stuff. This
Mhm.
little things didn't used to bother me. I used to just deal with it. I used to be strong. What's wrong with me? Where the reality is you were in fight or flight for so long that now that you're out of that, your body doesn't know how to act. It's still in a state of fight or flight. So essentially, calm can feel really uncomfortable when the bulk of your life has been chaos.
Mhm.
And in a trauma class I took, although the research around it always says that like it's developing and changing. So like I took this in 2019, I want to say, this class. So
Mhm.
some of this could have changed, but a lot of what they would talk about is that you don't really feel the impact of trauma until you're out of it. And especially like if your support system is disrupted. So like when you're out of trauma, because when you're like in fight or flight, your body is just in survival mode, it can feel like you're capable of a lot more, like in terms of like dealing with things. Like, yeah, it was yeah, you're just like going. You're like, I don't have feelings. I am survive. That is all I know how to do. It shuts down your like emotional responses as much as it can as a way to like make sure you get through it. So the teacher of the class I was in described it as a bear. So say like a bear visits you every day, and to survive, you're always like ready to fight or hide or escape from the bear. That bear visits every day, and you're doing whatever you need to survive the bear. Now, say that bear stops visiting, or a hunter gets it, the bear's gone. But you're so used to the bear visiting every day that your body is still ready to fight, hide, or escape from the bear. Or it knows there's like more than one bear in the world and the hunter didn't get
Mhm.
all the bears. So you're ready for one day that you'll meet another bear and it'll come find you.
Mhm.
That's kind of how our bodies respond
Yeesh.
to trauma. Yeah. In that, like,
That's
you're
heavy.
more used to trauma than calm, your body and mind are going to struggle with being outside of the trauma. It's going to make little things feel really big. It's like, for to speak from my own experience, like how someone dying, I was like, we got this. But then like my car had a flat tire and I was like, sell the car. Why do we need a car? The world is ending. Where we go from you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like a little thing that like shouldn't be the end of the world was the end of the world, and like a big thing that would like be totally reasonable to just like collapse during. I was like, this is fine. We just keep go. So
Mhm.
your body like doesn't know how to regulate the stuff when the bulk of your life has been in this fight or flight response. Um, And also, like, the main reason you go through the trauma, say a person in your life that you care about is no longer with you, that can reactivate a lot of those feelings because your protective factor is gone. So, like, when you're learning about trauma informed practices, a lot of what they say is that if you have one protective factor, your ability to get through the trauma is significantly higher. And then if you were to
Mm.
lose like your support system, so like say Steven, he's dealing with like his friends going off, like planning to go to college and planning to do this or that, or like breaking up, things are changing. Like they're not used to, they want things to go back to the way that they were because that's how they got through all that really scary stuff. That's what made all that really scary and awful stuff feel okay. And then when everything starts changing and like Connie's planning to go to college and like everyone's trying to like move on, he's feels like he's losing his support system. So all those feelings that he never really had to deal with in an intense way are like bubbling up in this way that he can't ignore because ultimately like it still hurts you, the trauma, it still impacts you,
Mhm.
but like you need your support systems to essentially help you get through it. And when you start to lose those things, it can like, really reactivate those emotions or just like really like have you react to big or small things like they're big things. So I could talk about trauma all day, genuinely. But if you would like to learn more about it, I highly recommend looking through the following resources, like when you're in a good headspace.
Mhm.
Because like anything else, you do not want to look into like your own life and your own trauma if you're in a bad headspace. Because it is very
Mhm.
doomsday clocky. It's like when you find out that the planet is dying and you're just like, I wasn't ready for that information. It was a Tuesday and I was already having a bad day. You want to
Yeah.
wait till you're having like an okay day before you unpack
Mhm.
your own personal trauma, as well as just like learn about it because it really does impact like your mental health does impact your physical health, and that's something that they do unpack more in the show. That like sometimes you can be hurt and it's just inside, even though you like feel fine. So as I said, the following resources, something that they show in like every intro trauma class, but it is really good is Nadine Burke Harris's How Childhood Trauma Affects Health Access or Affects Health Across a Lifetime. It really unpacks like how these experiences can impact your physical health. There's also trainings you can take. There's like online classes as well as in-person ones with lakeside trauma classes, as well as enhancing trauma awareness classes that they offer virtually. Or you can read the books that they gave us in the class, which is Life After Trauma, a workbook for healing, as well as the course book Creating Sanctuary. Um, Fun fact that so much research has started to develop around ACEs, adverse childhood experiences is what it's short for, that they've recognized it with the CDC as a health concern. So that's
Hmm.
positive for like people getting more access to mental health care, and like people taking like your mental health as seriously as your physical health, because ultimately if you neglect your mental health for too long, it's going to impact your physical health. Um, so the CDC has finally recognized that as a problem. And if you really want to be stressed, you can take the ACE test, which is basically just evaluating your own life and being like, cool, how much has this damaged me? As I said, you really want to be in a good headspace for that because if your number's really high, it feels very doomsday clock and it feels very hopeless. So you just really want to go into it like when you're in a good place so that you feel like you can handle it and also like make next steps and tackle the very real reality that like, bad things have happened and you have to deal with them to heal so that you don't perpetuate harm. Um, so yeah, I recommend those things. I'm going to talk a little bit also about like how even after you've kind of dealt with the trauma, that sometimes like you get to have the fun of like if we're dealing with a systemic problem like we have in Steven Universe and in America, that like harm happens without your direct choice because you were from an oppressor, like that is something that's also very real that unpack in the show. So I'm going to get into that part of it now. So in rewatching it, as I said, with media analysis classes on, it made the entire thing feel so much more impactful. I'd already watched it like many times. It's one of my favorite shows, as it is for Gabe. But in rewatching it, it like hit a lot harder than it did before, and it reinforced just how much I love it as a whole. Each episode was so intentional, especially in Steven Universe Future. I just felt like it was really trying to say stuff, and that was just cool. Specifically, the very important message that trauma and its impact is very real, as well as like how the systems the diamonds created do harm are not dismantled entirely when they step down from leadership. Like as Gabe was saying, like they really like let them off easy, and that's like really frustrating to watch. But also, it's like you really still see that like even though they're technically not in power anymore, the systems of harm do continue. Like in what the Lapis gems are doing on other planets, and like they're just keep going.
Mhm.
They're like we still destroy.
Mhm.
It's fine. Or even in the episode of volleyball that Gabe talked about briefly, in that like the damage is deeper than just one individual person. And I think like in understanding racism and like the systemic oppression is like super legit. And he's
Mhm.
saying it in a way that is like very clear. So in the episode Volleyball, where Stephen is confronted with Pink Diamond's original pearl, seeking medical care slash healing for the crack on their face, a crack that is revealed to be the fault of Pink Diamond. This episode does so much for impact over intent. Like you hurt people, and that matters more than like whether or not you meant to. Um, and how like the system that the diamonds built, you can't use that system to heal. It like really sent the message like you need to dismantle the system entirely. You can't like fix it from within because Steven's like, I just need a solution. Let's fix volleyball, which isn't even her name. He just gave her a nickname. Let's fix volleyball for this quick way because I can't deal with what my mom did. In his defense, he is 6 but like I can't deal with this. This is a lot. I can't do it. So we're just gonna fix it at this thing, this machine that literally makes pearls. Um, and rejuvenates them and hurts them, like resets them so that they're not cells anymore and other gross things. So he's seeking like a simple solution, but trying to use like this tool of oppression to do healing, and they're not compatible. And he finds that out very fast. So Stephen focuses on the word repair, discarding the fact that the shop has been used for harm. And the newly nicknamed volleyball prepares for healing. And Stephen says in a rush way, soon we'll all be able to put this in the past behind us. We won't have to think about what my mom did ever again.
Mhm.
I don't have to think about the harm. I won't be responsible for this anymore. Won't that be great? He's not handling it great. So the machine scans volleyball and it says there's nothing the machine can do because, as Gabe was talking about, like it's psychological. The injury is manifesting physically, but like it is inside of like it's mental damage that is or like mental harm that has been done by Pink Diamond to like really breach their trust. And in a really eerie and uncomfortable way, volleyball is like, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. And then the crack gets bigger. And it is kind of like foreshadowing, honestly, like what happens later because Steven's whole vibe is like, I'm fine. Don't look at me. Everything's fine. But like he's like bubbling and like turning into a monster. Um, so as I said, we see like these two pearls dealing with the fact that they've both been like very harmed by Pink Diamond and Rose Quartz. And they just explaining like, as Gabe said, like they didn't mean to hurt me. It happened because I was too close. And then Steven just screams, "It doesn't matter. I'm gonna fix it," which is like, what?
Not the answer. It does
Invalid.
matter.
It does matter. Like, what do you mean? And then we see Pearl start to get like upset because like this different portrayal of the gem she loved, but also like Steven get very upset because he doesn't feel like he can deal with this. And he says, which is just super telling, I can't deal with one more horrible thing she did, okay? I don't want to hear about it. I don't even want to think about it. I just want to fix it. Um, and it just felt like real on the nose and that like
Super valid.
yeah, like, it was just super on the nose, and, like, if we're thinking of it from, like, the fact that speaking for, like, myself about, like, the fact that we come from generations of oppressors and you can't like, it's hard to hear about it, but it's the Pearl was literally just saying their experience.
Mhm.
They were just
Mhm.
like, existing. They were existing, and they were like, "I just" they were just talking about what happened to them, like, the irreparable harm that has been done, and that was very triggering for him. It was very, like, white tears, and then, like, not realizing that, like, his emotional reaction would activate the system of harm that is this machine that they're trying to, like, heal with, And as we see this like kind of unpack, is like his dramatic outburst activates the system to basically be like, all right, you're mad. I'm going to destroy these pearls for you because that's what this does. And as I said, like Pearl's just existing, like explaining the harm that happened. And they kind of, after he like realizes what he did, he tries to undo it, but isn't able to. And then Pearl and Volleyball and like recognizing and like validating each other and their trauma and recognizing that like they are not over what Pink Diamond did and like saying like, I'm not going to make excuses for her anymore. She didn't mean to, but she did hurt me like badly and I was badly hurt and we have to deal with that. And then Volleyball asked the other Pearl like, how do we stop hurting? And in this such emotional scene, she's just like, I
Yeah.
didn't. And they hug and then they fuse. And
Mm.
then in fusing and grouping together, they escape, freeing themselves. And then also like Steven from the situation and they like dismantle the system of oppression. And I just wish that the diamonds got that a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah.
they destroyed in the process, and it just felt very spot on in the like you can't use the system that harms to heal the damage that has been done. And for a kid show, that felt real, like very good. It
Yeah.
was just like,
That's so
yes,
valid. I'm glad you brought that up. Because I was looking at it purely from that just abuse point of view for Rose, but yeah, it's totally true that it like you can't like especially if the system is designed to harm, like that's a whole thing, then it can't heal. It's designed to do the opposite. Period.
yeah. And just like I get it, like Steven's 16, he's dealing with a lot. Like his mom did a lot of damage. And like he's
Mhm.
young to be dealing with this right now, but it's also like recognizing like you can't just do the easy solution. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's gonna be hard. Sometimes bad things are gonna happen. Sometimes you might need to murder the diamonds. I need to. That might not be the
Shit.
fun, nice way to do it. Sometimes you gotta dismantle the system. So I just appreciated the children's show for instilling that in our youth.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate how it validated everyone's feelings and in that like how I am with this set, like you all get to choose how you feel about it. And that's like evident in the way that like how Peridot experiences her like freedom from oppression versus Lapis's freedom from oppression versus uh Pearl versus volleyball Pearl versus Jasper. Like every single one of them has their own personal journey and they're all unique, but they also have this core issue relating back to the diamond. So it's just like how are each of us adapting to um, a world where we have all acknowledged that it was a problem and now can make the moves to heal.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
super interesting. I really like I was blown away by Future because I liked it the first time. I did, but like it just didn't hit as hard as it did the last time yesterday when I watched the entire
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah,
Yeah.
and that's like for me the movie was something that just like really confirmed because I was like, okay, good. So I'm not the only one who knows she's a villain.
Yeah,
Like I'm
we
not
all
the only
agree
one
Pink
like
Diamond sucks.
yeah, Pink Diamond sucks. Rose Quartz was awful. The other Rose
Yeah.
Quartzes don't deserve that. And I think that even that interaction with him, like
Yeah.
in his, pseudo siblings, the Rose Quartzes, yeah, there's a lot. And I highly recommend you watch Steven Universe in its entirety. It is absolutely a kid show, so full warning on that. There are some really silly things that happen, but there's also there's a charm to it. It can be a comfort show that sneaks up
Yeah.
on you and has you feeling things and also empathizing, understanding, and meeting people with compassion and kind of like equipping you with these tools to be able to manage not only your own trauma or just pains of growing and existing in a world where other people are going to exist and do what they're going to do and impact you in these ways, but also how you can then impact other people in like from a place of care and understanding. And I think that's super powerful and not what you would
Yeah.
expect from such a adorable little show like Steven Universe.
Yeah. It
Like
definitely
flat
sneaks
out.
up on you. Like it's such a heavy world that you're in, but it like makes it seem like so fun at the same time. Like it really achieves being a kid show with such heavy topics. And I just love it. I want to rewatch it again, honestly. I rewatched three
Yeah.
times. Now I just want to go back and rewatch the first one. I watched the movie this morning and I was like, I can watch it a million times and still enjoy it.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, super recommend. And it isn't overtly horror, but there are some really horrific things that happen, including like the
Turns into
corruption
a
of
blob of cat.
gems, the blob. Yeah, he turns into a blob of cats. That was really scary. Him growing old was
Yeah.
terrifying. It was like an episode of Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
It was horrifying. The fusion inside the Earth, like their whole exploration, that's
Oh my god, the
terrifying.
cluster. Yeah.
Yeah. Or them being like the off colors being hunted by like the little survey bots coming at them to just literally unmake them
Yo.
because they're different. Like
When Lars, okay, we're already in Spoilerville. When Lars died, I was like,
yes.
did they just murder that child on this children's show? And the
Yes.
answer is
Yeah.
yes, but they bring him back to life, so it's
He's
fine.
alive and he's pink
But like,
Lars and
what a
he
time
finds
that
himself.
was! Like, super traumatic and horrifying. Like,
So true. Yeah. It is rough. And I think it's funny. I really appreciate it in future how they literally just show you the scenes of season 1 of his body being injured because it's like when we watch like anime or other animation because it's human, it's close to human, but it is animated, so it's not real. We can just like
yeah,
it doesn't affect us the same way as if we were to see a real human body endure that stress and trauma and violence.
yeah.
So seeing them be like, no, actually, there's repercussions for the actions. Like we don't get that in
Remember that
cartoon
fun
media.
time in the cartoon where all the silly antics happened? That was actually super traumatic for Steven. Look at it
Yeah,
all unfold with the sinister music. It's like they really set it up perfectly.
yeah. It's like Gohan, is that's Goku's
Oh my
son,
god,
right?
yeah.
Like
He
he
gets really yeeted at a mountain at age 2, and they're like, "Why doesn't
yeah.
he like to fight?"
Yeah, or like he just needs a Dr. Maheshwaran to tell him that it's okay to unpack the time where his dad gave the enemy a sensu bean so he could fight him better. Like,
Yo,
I think it's
yeah.
allowed that you can acknowledge that your
Like, it's
dad
okay if you
really
wanna just be a
sucks.
bug scientist, like, go live your best life. It's your life was
Yeah.
hard.
That's a lot. Yeah, exactly. One a redemption arc for all the little boy heroes who
I
don't
love
get to
Gohan, poor
go through that.
baby.
So yes. So yeah, that is our episode about Steven Universe. It is definitely long because I knew it was gonna be. It's impossible for it not to
It
be
could
this
have been
long. So
longer,
thank you
Gabe. We
for
could have just kept talking. We
I
could
we
have
could have
gone
picked
on for
like so many
years.
episodes, just picking out episodes, talking about Pearl, finding her like sexuality, and
We start a Steven
learning to
Universe
like Gray. Just a whole. We should have a Steven Universe
learning to like
podcast
Greg. That's so real. I didn't like him till the Human Zoo episode, I'm not gonna lie. Um,
from the choosing.
the
Who didn't choosing
choosing
them?
Greg.
Uh, Gareg. Yes.
God, I love him.
It is super silly. It's very cute. Highly recommend. So definitely let us know what you think about Steven Universe. If there's another cartoon that you highly recommend. I mean, I feel like we should do She-Ra one day.
Oh my
Things
god,
like that.
She-Ra. She-Ra, Dead
But
End. There's so many.
yeah. And we were even gonna do Adventure Time, but we cut it just because it's like it's deep as not deep. It's not Steven Universe deep.
Yeah.
Nothing
It's
is.
not Steven
So
Universe deep. Yeah.
yeah.
There'll
So
be more too. Like they keep making them. So like kid
yeah.
shows that are like deep. So it's gonna keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And so next week we'll be closing out our Kids Are All Right series with a literal horror film. We're coming back and we'll talk about just like that fear you only feel as a young person, where the darkness in the world around us is so uncertain that we can fill it with
Yeah.
anything in our head. So, very excited for that. And definitely let us know how you feel about Steven Universe or what you thought about our analysis and suggestions for things. And don't get married.
Delete your kids. Or your
Or you made a
kids will be
kid.
the gems
You
worth
made a kid and you
nothing.
shouldn't have
Yeah.
made a kid, Rose Quartz.
Yeah. You made a kid and
I'll just
like should have solved all the problems first before making kid.
so
I don't know.
rude.
Like end the war, then make kid. Don't make kid middle war, have to deal with all the war that you left. Why? So
Yeah.
rude.
Yeah, I do really wish Pink
No one
could
has
have
to be
come
alive,
back in some
specifically Steven.
capacity. Yeah. 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 All right. Well, bye.
Bye.